My kids called him Uncle Larry, his kids called me Uncle Michael. But the whole time I was his meal ticket because he knew if he ever got in trouble that I was the guy that they would want. So he kept a diary on me. He testified against me in one case, a big case with Rudy Giuliani indicted me, and I was acquitted. So the jury still didn't believe him.
You're making all the family's money now. They're all kind of happy about you, but at the same time, you're there as well. What happened when all of a sudden you were growing a little too fast? What kind of threats did you start seeing at that point? Were there some people that were power people saying, wait a minute, I don't like this guy having this much power?
Yeah, you know what happened? I had a couple of things against me. Number one, I was a younger guy. And the older guys tend to resent you. You're young, you're doing all this, you're making all this money. And that comes with the territory. You can't help that. You try to deal with it as best you can. You're not flaming that fire, so to speak, but it happens. And then, I had teamed up with the Russians. I had all the Russian mob guys in Brighton Beach, Brooklyn, were all my partners, and they were a pretty big crew. And I think it was Newsday, a publication out in Long Island, had written a story that I was becoming so powerful I was going to break away from the Colombos and start my own family. No truth to it whatsoever. It was like a fairy tale, fiction, made up. But it got into people's heads. And, my boss started to question some of the Russian guys. Some things started to happen like that. And I knew it, so I was on my guard about it. My father and I discussed it. My dad was always in and out of jail on parole. So when he was out, we talked about these things. But I knew I had to watch myself. It comes with the territory.
What was the one event that happened where you're kind of like, listen, I got to start taking a look at what's going on with me? Was it Joey Colombo's story? Was it the Castellano, what Gotti did to him? Or what was it where you're like, listen, I'm going to start paying a little bit more attention on what's going on in the marketplace right now?
It wasn't that. It was an incident that I had personally with my boss when they basically walked me into that room and really put me on the hot seat. Because there was a story that said that I had stole $2 billion from the government, and I'm handing the family $2 million a week. So, I got questioned. They were saying, $2 billion, Michael. I said, hey, my answer was, when they write about everybody else, it's a lie. When they're writing about me, all of a sudden it's the truth. I said, come on, man, I'm giving you guys all this money. You don't have to do anything. I'm taking care of everything, I put nobody in trouble. Nobody's on the line here. If anybody goes down, it's going to be me and my crew. I said, well, what's going on here? So I got a little upset about it. And then I was talking to the boss, and you don't lose your head with the boss, but I got a little angry. And then I had to tone myself down a little bit, But that put me on the alert. I said, I got to really watch myself here because, mistakes here you pay dearly for in life. And it kind of just, like I said, put me really on my guard. Yeah, I'll be honest with you, I thought I might have gotten killed that night. The setup was bad. My best friend was walking me into a room. It was a room in Brooklyn. I'll be honest with you, I had to walk out of the car and into that house and that basement apartment. It was probably a 30-yard walk. That was either the longest or the shortest walk of my life.
Wow.
Yeah, as I speak now, I can hear the crickets chirping, and I can remember the smell of the flowers.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, because Patrick, I learned something. When you think you're going to meet your maker, and I wasn't a religious guy at that point, you start to pray. And I was nervous. I tried not to show it because I said, hey, if this is it, this is it. You kind of get conditioned in that life. But that was the night, and I didn't appreciate it.
Years later now, because you hear stories that your father was involved and he wasn't involved. How do you feel about that whole situation? Where was your dad really kind of saying, let's find out if Michael is really making this money and I'm not, we're not getting a piece of it? How did you respond to that at that time?
I think my dad kind of threw me under the bus a little bit that night. He went in separately, and I was told that he didn't defend me. He just kind of backed off and said, hey, if my son is stealing, he does everything, I don't do anything. I'm on parole, he handles everything. And
were you guys on bad terms at that time?
No, we were on great terms.
Wow.
And it really hurt, because I said, man, it kind of gave me really pause, because I said, if this life can separate father and son, what do we really have here? I never said anything to him, because, again, in that life, you learn to keep things quiet until you're the right time. And but it really put me on notice that I got to really be careful. I was very disappointed in him. It didn't change my love for him or anything, but I was really disappointed. It really hurt.
How do you, from a moment like that, that's a big scar. This is a man that grew up, you need to be a man's man from 5 years old. He's shaping you into who you are, and he's coming to your games, he's always at your game. How do you from that moment trust anybody else and not believe that, at some moment somebody could turn on me? Is that the faith part that completely changed it, that brought the peace?
It did. I understand my father. I know he's really a product of that life, and I kind of understood, even though I didn't appreciate it. I knew my dad still loved me. It wasn't anything like that. It's very hard to explain to anybody else. Like, even my wife has a real problem with this. She says, how do you forgive that? I used to tell her, don't worry about it. It's okay. And, we have this special bond between us, and I understand the life. I'm a product of it too. But it was still disappointing because I would have never done that to him. But I'll tell you what, I almost thank him for it now. Because I'll tell you this, Patrick, I met my wife 2 years after that. And that's when I made the decision to walk away from that life. But if this incident didn't happen with my dad, I don't think I would have ever walked away.
Wow.
I think that was God's way of separating me from this bond, or this hold that my dad had on me. So I look back and I said, actually, it was a good thing, because I don't think I would have walked away.
It's amazing how you process it that way. I don't know who can sit there and go through that and not think of it a different way, but the way you're processing is the man that did this to give your life maybe a second chance type of a situation. Very interesting. So, and now he's 100 years old. You were telling me, he had a surgery recently. He's doing good. He's still sharp. He thinks he's going to live a long time, which is great.
He still talks to me like I'm part of that life. He's unbelievable.
Is he still reminiscing and telling old stories? You remember Michael? Or?
Yes. I always say this. Look, my dad did a lot of rough things in his life. So did I. I went to jail for a crime that I was guilty of. But, that particular crime that he did 38 years in prison for, he was innocent of. And I'll take that to my grave.
Really?
Oh, 100%. I investigated that case, spoke to every witness. They recanted their testimony. We gave them lie detector tests, proved they lied at the trial. The FBI was complicit in turning them against my dad. It was a bad case. He was framed, 1,000%. People say, well, he got away with so much. Mm-hmm. That's not how our system's supposed to work. They have enough tools and weapons, the government, to get people the right way. They're not supposed to do that, no matter what or who you are. Because if they do it against the bad guys, one day they can do it against the good guys if it suits them. So I always tell people, look, you wouldn't want my dad's life in the last 50 years. That man suffered. He did 38 years in prison. My sister died of an overdose of drugs while he was away. My brother was a drug addict. My brother actually turned against my father, went into the witness protection program and testified against him and got him thrown back in jail. My kid brother. My father was destroyed over that. Wow. My mom passed away in the last years before she passed away. I can only describe their relationship as ugly, because she blamed him for everything. 33 years without a husband, she blamed him for everything that went down. So, the guy suffered tremendously. And I have a real heart for that. I love my dad, and we've patched things up, It's amazing how, people said I'd never have a relationship with him again, that, when I walked away, and God has brought it full circle. And I found out one thing, Patrick. You have to give children want to love their parents. You got to give them a real reason not to love their parents.
Powerful.
Absolutely. I'm just thankful that we have this relationship again.
So Sparks Restaurant's famous for, Paul Castellano is where he got shot outside by John Gotti and that whole relationship. How was Paul Castellano? Was he really just a money business guy?
I knew Paul. I didn't know him well because he was a boss. I was young at that time, but I was in his company quite a bit, and I did have an incident with him. And quite honestly, the word on him on the street was not great. I don't think he had a lot of real friends on the street, especially in the other families. I know in our family they didn't talk well about him. More of a business guy, that kind of a thing. I think people think that maybe he didn't earn the position that he had because he was so close to Carlo, and Carlo gave him that spot. It went down with Gotti. It was either him or Gotti at that point, and John made the move. And, in our life, there's no election process. If you're going to take over, you're going to take over the hard way.